Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Chris. I am a part-time reseller on eBay. Today is a bit of a different video to the norm. I haven't been outsourcing, so I'm afraid there isn't going to be any live footage. I apologise for that. It's not a sales video. It's going to be another discussion. A discussion about clothing brands. In particular, clothing brands that have let me down for reasons that I'm not quite sure. I can't quite fathom. But before we get into that, a little bit of background if you are new here. So I sell stuff on eBay part-time as a hobby, you could say. Whenever I go to a charity shop, I'll typically gravitate towards the clothing first. It's just the thing I'm most sort of comfortable with selling. I'm quite a clumsy person, so if it's clothing, I can drop it on the floor and it's not going to break. Whereas, you know, with like crockery, glassware, I just stay well clear because I'm super clumsy. But yeah, something about clothing that just really piques my interest. I love all sort of like the materials that are used, the designs. There's just something about it. I just love the different sort of nuances and little niches that can really do really well, and as well as the more sort of standout brands that typically are priced higher that I'll avoid. But on my reselling journey, I've made quite a few mistakes with clothing. I've watched videos, read up on things, found brands that I thought would do well, and for whatever reason, price point, size, material composition, colours, they just haven't performed for me. And I've got a list of a fair few where now I probably wouldn't bother picking up anything in these brands unless it's something exceptional. And for whatever reason, these brands just haven't, let's say, they haven't performed well for me. Whereas for other people, they'll perform quite well. So I guess it applies to everyone. Certain brands, certain types of clothing just doesn't do particularly well for whatever reason. So I thought I'd explain, or go through a few of those brands, explain why they haven't done well for me. Not why you shouldn't pick them up yourself, but just why personally, in my experience, there's just something about them. They've lingered around for ages. If they have eventually sold, they just haven't sold for very much. They've just been disappointing. I think that's probably the best way of sort of summarising it. They've just been very disappointing, and there are better ways of investing, in my opinion. So, without further ado, I'm going to go through some of these brands. I've got quite a few actually. I've got them sort of written down on my phone. I won't go through all of them because I think we'll be here for quite a while. But just the brands that I had middling to high hopes for, and for whatever reason, they just haven't fulfilled those hopes. So, brand number one, Gant. Gant, typically, well, I think they are fully menswear brand. You could like them to say probably Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, crew clothing, that sort of thing. And I initially saw retailers pick up sort of Gant's jumpers with sort of the crest and the embroidered logo, the name, shirts, jackets, that sort of thing. Gant is probably, I'm just looking at this list. Gant is probably the most disappointing brand of them all for me. I've picked up so much Gant in the past, almost in bulk in one go, hoping it would do really well, and it just hasn't. If you look on eBay at the comps with sort of completed listings of various Gant items, you can see that they do quite well in theory, but from my experience, I'll list it up at that. I'll get hardly any views. I might get a couple of watches, but they don't do anything. They don't even respond to sort of offers. And stuff just sits there. And I think the quantity of Gant listed on eBay perhaps outweighs the demand. I think it's going to be one of these brands. But in my time reselling, which admittedly is only sort of, where are we now? Coming up to nearly 2 years. There's only a couple of Gant things that have stood out. A quilted jacket. It sold quite quickly and quite well, and a really big plain t-shirt with a small logo. I think it's like a 3XL, so obviously there's demand there. But everything else, particularly the shirts, particularly the cotton shirts, my shop might as well be a museum for them because no one is buying. Even priced at say 15 quid, these shirts would have been expensive new, probably what, 60, 70 quid new? Even these shirts in fantastic condition, nothing. There's absolutely nothing. No desirability at all. And that also stems to, I've had Gant jeans, I've had Gant chinos, say jumpers, even like sort of cashmere blend jumpers, Gosh, what else have I had? Yeah, the jackets. Yeah, so much Gant, but just no demand. So I'm now probably not going to be picking up any Gant at all. I've still got Gant listed on my shop. I've even got Gant jackets that just aren't doing anything. So I think I'm going to blanket ban Gant. It's just, I don't know. I can't explain it. It just, for whatever reason, Gant just does not sell well in my shop. So off the list they go. Second brand, and this is going to come as a bit of a surprise. It's Reebok. Yeah, you think the whole vintage-ish sportswear hype that we're probably the tail end of it now, but certainly a sort of year or so ago, people were going mad for like old Nike sweatshirts, Adidas, Champion. Reebok just never seemed to hit the mark. I had a couple of vintage sweatshirts listed. They just didn't sell. Again, pricing it at the comps, maybe a little bit below. Nothing, like absolutely nothing. So again, I don't know if people were after a specific type of Reebok jumper or sweatshirt back then, but for whatever reason, mine, which were, photographed well, priced fairly, didn't really get a look in. And I found that comparing older Reebok items to comparative Adidas and Nike ones, there's a real stark contrast in the demand for Reebok. Vintage holdalls, even footwear, jumpers, tracksuit bottoms, that sort of thing. The demand for Nike and Adidas is just so much greater than Reebok. I'd probably put Reebok and Puma in the same box. There just doesn't really seem to be a demand for these brands unless it's something exceptional. So again, Reebok, I probably wouldn't pick it up again unless it's something just completely stand out, some completely at odds to the rest of the sort of typical Reebok sort of garments. Yeah, disappointing. So another one, Reebok, probably going to avoid. So sorry Reebok, but you've let me down. Moving on to a women's brand. Again, this brand I thought I had good expectations for. I'm pretty sure I sold something at this brand. The first thing I ever picked up, and it sold really well. I thought, I'm going to pick up this brand loads now. I think it was a one-off because, I'll just tell you, it's Hobs. Hobs London, sort of like middle range, I guess, women's brand. Probably on a similar level as like Hush and Mint Velvet, that sort of ilk, if you know what I mean. But yeah, Hobs sucks. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, Hobs is terrible. I've bought Hobs dresses, like jumpsuits. I've got a silk and cotton wedding sort of two-piece dress and jacket thing for, blazer jackets, denim skirts, wool skirts. The list goes on. And to be fair, more times than not, I've donated what I've bought because they just have not sold, like at pretty much any price. I just can't fathom. Again, I'm not sure if the supply outweighs the demand. The only Hobs thing I've ever sold well was a moon wool tweed skirt that sold pretty well. But I think if it wasn't for that moon tweed element to it, it would probably still be for sale now. I'm sure Hobs had their heyday. I'm sure they had their sort of golden period. I think I've missed that golden period, and now I guess the demand isn't quite there. And it applies to all these brands. If the demand isn't there, it doesn't matter how special the item is, it may take ages to sell or not sell at all because no one's really looking for it. And I think maybe because Hobs is heavily discounted in certain places, I don't know. I haven't seen it at TK Maxx. I haven't sort of seen it in like discount stores anywhere. So I don't know if that applies to it. But yeah, man, Hobs has really let me down. Hobs is like the female equivalent of Gant. It's like F tier brand for me right now. So I won't pick it up, even unless it's something again exceptional or has like a collaboration like moon tweed or whatever. I'm just gonna avoid Hobs like the plague because it's not worth me investing in if it's just gonna sit around. It's a shame because it is a good brand, but I mean all these brands are. They just let me down. So there we go. Hobs. Just be careful what you pick up with Hobs. Next brand. Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this. It's All Saints. You're probably thinking, what? But All Saints sells really well for me. Again, I think the sort of the hype has died down a little bit. I'm talking about the All Saints Ramskull line of clothing. So the Ramskull is like All Saints logo. I found there was a time where it would sell really well, but over the last year, it's just tanked. Like really, really tanked. And stuff that I would have been getting sort of £25 plus 4, now struggle to get 20. And I guess people are just looking elsewhere. Maybe the sort of whole Ramskull desirability has just sunk as well. But yeah, I've got multiple Ramskull things listed, barely gets a look in, whereas before it would generate quite a bit of traffic. So again, I think it's probably to do with trends as well. Trends come and go. I think All Saints Ramskull stuff, personally, from my experience, it might be different for you, just is on a bit of a downward trend, and I probably wouldn't pick it up currently. It just isn't doing that well. Or if I do pick it up, it's got to be dirt cheap, because the price realised is going to be lower because the desirability just isn't there, if that makes sense. It's a real shame, because I think All Saints is a good brand. It just, again, it's going for a bit of a dip period, and until it picks up again, I'm just not going to bother. And on the subject of dip periods, Weird Fish and Fat Face. Do you remember the Weird Fish and the Fat Face sort of pullover or full zip heavy knit hype that was around last year? Yeah, that's died. That's definitely died. Yeah, the Fat Face Airly, the really thick, heavy cotton like pullover tops, and the Weird Fish macaroni knit jumpers. Man, the demand it just skyrocketed out of nowhere, and you could pick them up maybe for £3 or £4 in charity shops. Get them sort of 20, 25 plus, you know. Then the charity shops kind of caught on to the fact that it was selling well, and then the hype has sort of just died down. So now they're still really expensive in charity shops, but not really achieving that price on eBay. I think it's quite funny, but anyway, there's that. So yeah, again, it's just like following trends. The whole probably premise of this video is that fashion trends come and go. The second-hand market stuff just peaks and troughs. You just kind of got to keep on top of it to really make the most of the reselling clothing. I couldn't really tell you what the best brand to resell currently is. Maybe something like, well, Carhartt is probably up there. Dickies seems to be quite popular. Just like workwear stuff. But also stuff like Finisterre, Patagonia. You know, the sort of the higher end brands that just people love to wear. So back to the phone. But yeah, Weird Fish, Fat Face. I love wearing Fat Face myself. I don't really wear Weird Fish, but as a resale brand, I would avoid it. At least for now. I mean, you might be watching this video into the future and thinking, what? Weird Fish, Fat Face are doing really well. I guess the trend's back on trend, I guess. But yeah, as of the tail end of 2023, not so much. But anyway, let's move on. Here's one that... where did I first saw this brand? I think Chaddy Pete introduced me to this brand, John Smedley. I believe they're mainly a men's, women's as well, like a knitwear brand. They do sort of like Sea Island cotton, sort of like merino wools, like more like sort of knitted cardigans and stuff and jumpers. Had high hopes for John Smedley. Well, I bought 3 John Smedley items, and I still have all 3 John Smedley items. They're still for sale. Sort of 100, 150 days later after listing them. Listing them at the completed listings rates, prices realised previously. They're not selling. Don't know why. They are a smaller size, admittedly. But yeah, John Smedley. I was so pumped to find them out in the wild. But it's kind of turned into a bit of a disappointment because they're not selling at all. Not even really getting much interest. Barely any watches. So I don't know enough about John Smedley to know if we're in a trough of popularity. It seems to be like one of those brands that's kind of like under the radar and is appreciated but in lower numbers. Maybe the supply outweighs the demand. I don't know. But for whatever reason, John Smedley probably wouldn't pick it up in the future. I know. I'll leave it for someone else. It just isn't performing for me. And on a similar note, and this may shock a few of you, Paul Smith. Paul Smith isn't doing that well for me either. Again, fancy pattern cotton shirts that I thought would sell fairly quickly. Nope, not at all. Big sizes, lovely conditions, good material, lovely sort of stitching and stuff. There's nothing. And that really shocked me because Paul Smith is such a popular brand. I thought at least, you know, more attractive shirts, standout shirts, would do quite well. Turns out no, at least not for me. So yeah, Paul Smith, a bit stagnant. I think, yeah, stagnant is the word I'm going to use for Paul Smith. I'm sure it can sell well, but the stuff I've got for sale just isn't doing that well at all. Annoying, because say it's got a worldwide appeal, Paul Smith. I'd say some Paul Smith stuff can do incredibly well, and I have had success in the past, particularly with the jeans and like chinos. But yeah, shirts, polo shirts, t-shirts, maybe not. Maybe not. The only thing I sold recently that has done well was almost like a chore shirt that sold really quickly. But apart from that, the normal shirts and polos and stuff, big no from me. Again, same sort of scenario as Gant, same scenario as Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren. So yeah, I don't know if it's like a cross-brand issue with like just sort of like t-shirts and stuff, but again, I'll be thinking twice about picking up in the future. Shame, but there we go. Two more, then I'll let you go. Oakley. Oh no, first of all, disclaimer: Oakley shoes, okay, the two pairs that I found have done really well for me, but Oakley clothing, ooh, yeah, not good at all. Jackets, no. Jumpers, no. What else have I had? Polo shirts, no. Even stuff that you think would be quite popular, just like plain logo stuff. Again, no real demand for it. But Oakley is like such a renowned brand. You think that the demand would be there, but apparently not. Apparently not. Admittedly, I haven't found that much Oakley. We're talking sort of 3 or 4 items. But all of those items either took an eternity to sell, or they're still listed and there's just no interest. So again, going forward, Oakley, I will be having second thoughts. And in fact, a few months ago now, I found some Oakley in a charity shop. They had sort of 3 or 4 items, priced fairly well. But I just thought, based on what I've known or what I've experienced on eBay, I left them because I thought I'm going to be investing about 15 quid here. But ultimately, are these things going to sell? Maybe not. So yeah, I left it. So there we go. And the last brand I'll mention today, and I'm sure there'll be like a part 2 video coming out down the line, is a brand that's again, I don't want to say if Chaddy Pete introduced it to me. Well, I was aware of it. I didn't know it was potentially a good brand to resell. Sprayway. I've had no luck with Sprayway at all. I've got a Gore-Tex Sprayway jacket listed, barely any interest. The only reason I sold one of my other Sprayway jackets is because somebody had one when they were younger and it brought back nostalgic memories for them, so they bought it. Cool, I'm glad to fulfill that, but again, a bit of a one-off. But yeah, fleeces, jackets, trousers, nothing. I haven't even touched the shirts or the underlayers. I'm not going to bother with. But it was poised as such a great brand to resell. Along similar lines to Rohan, I think it was sort of caught up in the Rohan hype, which I guess kind of still exists, but again is not as great as it once was. But it still sells okay if you get the right thing. But yeah, Sprayway, massive disappointment. To the fact that I might just keep the Sprayway jacket that I've got because it's not selling at all. And I think I've got it at a price of 25 quid, which for a Gore-Tex jacket is an absolute bargain. Not a shameless plug, I'm just saying what I've experienced. But yeah, Sprayway, not a brand I'm probably going to be picking up again. I've seen it in charity shops, just the basic coats. Haven't even looked at the price. Like, wouldn't even pay a couple of quid because, well, I'd probably pay a couple of quid. Hypocrite! But yeah, if you're paying sort of £5 or £6, and you know you're expecting to get sort of 25, it might never happen. So there we go. There are some brands that have really let me down in reselling circles. But the thing about this whole experience is you can choose what to buy. So now I know that those brands haven't done well for me. In the future, if I'm outsourcing, I won't pick them up. And I won't spend money needlessly on something that won't sell well for me in sort of due course. And that's what it's all about, really. It's finding things that do work well for you, do sell well for you, and avoiding things that don't. Because the best thing you can do is not buy something that doesn't do well. There's no point spending money on something in the hope that it might do well. you really want to sort of pick things that you know will sell well, or at least experiment with to find out. Because I'm not going to be buying Hobs things in the future again, because ultimately I've bought things in the past and for whatever reason they haven't sold. Sold similar, relisted, what have you. Good photos, good descriptions, filled out all the blooming eBay relevant like topics, or as many as I can. Nothing, absolutely nothing. So there we go. It's all a learning curve, isn't it? It's all a learning curve. I'll leave it there because there are loads more I can think of, but I think that's sort of that's the main brands that sort of came to mind when sort of thinking about doing this video. It's a shame, and I say this is purely my experience. You might have better experiences, and please, if you have, let me know, because these brands should do better. They should do so much better than they have for me, but for whatever reason I still can't put my finger on it. I've got no idea why they haven't done it that well, but there we go. I won't be picking them up again. I'll be leaving them for someone else. So thank you. Just hit my drink over. Thank you so much for watching. If you have got this far, again, sorry it's a bit of a waffle. It's kind of how my videos are anyway, but hopefully you picked something up from my experiences of trying to sell these brands. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't pick these up, but perhaps just tread a little bit more cautiously. Maybe like what you've watched or sort of seen elsewhere is that they might not do as well as you'd want them to do. I think that's probably the best way I can summarise it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe. Please do subscribe if you're not already. It's free and it really helps the channel out. But until next time, take care and I will see you then. Goodbye.